Okay. Well, first of all, the most important thing, Happy Father's Day. So welcome to MAP, M-A-P, MSRP and RPM, and what's legal and how to enforce it. I'm Todd Seelman. I'm a partner in the law firm Lathrop & Gage. I office in Denver, Colorado, and I am the co-chair of the Antitrust Competition Practice Group for my firm. We're going to talk about an exciting topic today. What about retail pricing? What about the control of retail pricing by manufacturers? What benefits do the consumers get? What do they obtain? Are we measuring benefit to the consumer welfare adequately? All these things will be discussed today. We'll talk about the legalities of different types of manufacturer to retail price strategies. We'll talk a little bit about what the antitrust laws are and what they're not in a very easy, digestible way, not full of legal jargon, which nobody understands anyway. You can tell I'm the lawyer. I'm the guy in the suit, so it's easy to pick me out. Afterwards, when we're all done, if you have a question, please feel free to come and find me. I'll stand out like a sore thumb. Okay, here's kind of the organizational structure for what we will talk about today. I'm going to introduce this fine panel of folks, retailers, manufacturers, and a company that does internet monitoring for pricing. Great company. I'll talk about the antitrust laws. What are state and federal antitrust laws? What apply to these kinds of manufacturer, retailer circumstances? I will talk about the current law, federal and state. And something happened here that I have no idea. I don't want to improve my performance. That just assumes I need improvement. Well, that's really an awkward way to start, isn't it? And then we'll get to brick and mortar versus internet retailing, which is really kind of the issue. The driving force here is there a juxtaposition between brick and mortar retailing versus internet? Should there be only two things to compare? And again, how do consumers benefit? Is that the main point? We'll talk about some of those policy considerations. And then we'll have questions and answers from you, or at least the answers should come up to the table and the questions come from you. And again, afterwards, if you have individual questions, you can certainly approach any of us. Okay, as I said, I introduced myself before, but we also have Mike Barta he's the president of International Playthings. And Mike, if you could give us a little short information about your company, I would much appreciate it.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. I'm the president of International Playthings. We're a multi-branded company, as many of you may know. We have a MAP policy that has been in place for 4 or 5 years now on our Calico Critter brand, and it is an interesting contrast between our MAP and non-MAP lines and the challenges that we face in enforcing them. I look forward to providing whatever input I can.
Here it goes again, prompting me to give more information on how to improve my speech. We also have, Dee Farrell. Dee, if you would introduce yourself, that'd be wonderful, please.
Thank you. You guys hear me? Happy Father's Day again. I'm Dee Farrell. I'm one of the owners and senior vice president of Nito International. We are one of the experts in fun and functional storage for kids. We are just getting started with our MAP policy. Very different perspective and different place in the curve than Mike is. We sell in 80 countries around the world. We work with Shopatron, selling on the internet. We work with Amazon. And we are here to get started and learn about this as it's come to affect our business in many ways.
Kate Turner, who is the owner of Kids Stop and Baby Stop, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Everybody knows we're in toys, and we've had Kids Stop toys and books for 14 years. We've been online for about 6 years. First couple years were crash and burn. And then we opened a baby store, and we ventured into unknown charted waters for us. But we're true retailers. We love our community. We believe in being involved in the community. And I think that's what's held us for so many years.
Thank you. Ron Solomon, who is the owner of the Creditor Network and MapTrap, if you could introduce yourself, please.
My name is Ron Solomon, the founder of a company called the Creditors Network. It's a network of manufacturers who have an online resource to exchange information about their customers. A couple of years ago, at the Astra show, the members approached us and introduced us to the concept of MAP and explained that they were having some issues and asked if we could explore ways in which we could help them. So we took a couple of years and created a search algorithm that will monitor websites for price infractions, that will cross-reference data in our databases and across the World Wide Web, federal databases, et cetera, to find out who the companies are and then give the manufacturers, the vendors, help in identifying problems and helping them to resolve those issues.
Thank you, Ron. Now I'm going to take a little trip down Antitrustville, and we're going to talk about antitrust laws, probably the most boring part of this whole thing. But I'll try to make it really interesting, and hopefully I won't be prompted to improve this any more than it is right now. So, there are two different ways of looking at the antitrust laws. One is that there's a federal landscape and a state landscape. That's what I'd say the majority of people miss. They think of the federal laws and don't think about the state laws. What are the differences? Federal law covers interstate commerce, things that are traveling across interstate lines, things that are in interstate commerce. That's federal. When it crosses a state, when commerce is crossing a state, the state has an interest in knowing about that product and the sale of that product in the state. So state laws apply to those products as well. Yeah, let's see, you got prompted. How you like that? See, it just got started. So the important thing is, because we have a federal and state set of laws, we have to look at both. In dealing with this issue, which the issue today is going to be vertical pricing, which the antitrust laws are like this big and vertical pricing is like this big, so we're dealing with a small column of law. Both federal and state law applies. Both federal and state law applies. That's the first takeaway. The states usually follow federal law. They usually have harmonizing statutes which say, whatever the feds do, we do. Some states don't do that. Some states have deviated from federal law. So they have unique law. In this particular area, some states like New York, California, and Maryland have deviated from the federal laws with regard to vertical pricing. It's another takeaway point. Some states, Kansas as an example, was a state that deviated from the harmonization language, and that has changed. The legislature has now changed that their statute so it's more in harmony with federal law. What's the point of the antitrust laws? Horrible word, antitrust, horrible. Can't get anybody to understand it. Think of antitrust as competition. Okay, in other parts of the world, antitrust laws are the competition laws. What is the antitrust law supposed to do? What are they trying to protect? Competition. Federal and state antitrust laws protect competition. There's a machinery of competition, meaning there are buyers and sellers, there are people who want to be buyers and sellers, there are consumers. All of those things, the machinery of competition, the antitrust laws try to protect that. What are they protecting it from? Unreasonable restraints. Not every restraint, not every impediment to competition, just those that are unreasonable. That's a key word. Another takeaway. What are unreasonable restraints? This little thing that pops up all the time would be an example of an unreasonable restraint. Yes. Oh, I approve. I don't know what it is, but I certainly want to approve whatever they're asking me. If these glasses were a little bit stronger, I could actually read whatever that was saying. But so let's break down and see if we can figure out what an unreasonable restraint is to make everybody more comfortable with what we're talking about. Antitrust laws cover single company conduct. meaning that's like a monopolist, somebody that's really large or some company that's really large that exerts its power on federal or state commerce. That power by a single party, the antitrust laws try to put those folks in check. Now, there are lots of companies that like to be monopolists. They'd like to have that power. So what they do, they cheat the system. They agree, they combine, or they conspire to act like a monopolist. The antitrust laws put checks on those people as well. In fact, the antitrust laws are most concerned with those people. A monopolist is easy to spot. We know some. When companies that are acting seemingly independent are trying to act like a monopolist because they act in concert or jointly, they're hard to find. They're deceiving the public because we thought that they were independent companies. But behind the scenes, they're not independent at all. They act together. "23 years later, finally can read something and actually act appropriately." So this concept of joint behavior, I'll refer to it as gang behavior. Gang behavior. The antitrust laws will focus and treat more harshly gang behavior. Why? We are afraid of gangs. We are afraid of gang behavior. Both in criminal law and civil law, the antitrust laws are no exception. So we look more harshly at conduct by companies that should be competing who pretend to compete but don't. We will look at that differently. The antitrust laws do that. So what do judges do? Judges say, well, is this a particular type of thing that we should be concerned about, this unreasonable restraint of trade? Well, over time, since the enactment of our antitrust laws in 1890, we have determined that certain things are so important, certain things affect our economy so much that they're always unreasonable. Those have been price, supply, and the exclusion of competitors. When do those things come up? When prices are set and moved around at will by a single company or a group of companies acting in concert, or to reduce supply, which drives price, either by a single company or by a group of companies acting in concert, or pushing competitors that exist in the market out, or preventing competitors that would like to compete in the market from coming in. It's the bully in the sandbox. We're pushing people out that should be there. We're keeping people out of the box who want to be there. That type of conduct is what the antitrust laws are looking at. They don't want bullying, either by a single large person or a gang. Now, if that is more helpful to understand the antitrust laws, that's what it should feel like. Is there the type of power that is being exerted in the market to prevent things in the machinery of competition to function? That's the antitrust laws, both in the state and federal level. So because of this agreement issue, because of this gang behavior, this is how the vertical price fixing issues have come up historically. When manufacturers and retailers or wholesalers agree to set certain prices, historically the antitrust laws have treated that very harshly. They have said that is unreasonable per se, meaning without more. Those agreements as to price, retail price, historically have been unlawful, period. Now, the Supreme Court said, well, you know, over time we've been looking at this. Is it true that price agreements are always or almost always so harmful to our economy that we will judge it to be unreasonable all the time? Well, no. Over time, from at least 1975 going forward, the Supreme Court has eroded that rule. Eroded that rule as to manufacturer, retail, or wholesale, this vertical column, this relationship between vertically related companies, that has been judged differently than competitors. Competitors that are horizontally related versus vertically related, which is manufacturer to retailer, wholesaler, down to the consumer level. The Supreme Court has said, no, not the same thing, not the same harm to interstate commerce. Some states have said harm to us. We don't care, it's all the same. That would be California, New York, Maryland, Kansas formerly. All the rest of the states look at it like the federals do, which is we're not sure. We're not sure if that is so bad and deleterious to our economy that we're going to judge it to be unreasonable per se. We're going to let a judge decide by weighing out pro and anti-competitive benefits to the consumer. Is there consumer welfare lost? We'll look at that. Problem is that judges do a really poor job of judging that. Okay, judges aren't necessarily the best people to arbitrate what's best for the economy. Why? Judges are people. They don't have the experience to analyze in a particular market so that there is a unified body of law. So because of that, when the law moved from the per se rule to a what's called a rule of reason, people stayed away from vertical pricing. The federal government stayed away from it. The Federal Trade Commission, the Department of Justice stayed away from vertical price fixing because it's too hard to figure out whether there's an actual restraint or not. Does that make some sense? So the movement in federal law, some people took that to mean, hey, it's okay. It's okay to set prices between manufacturers and retailers. No, it's not. It's not okay to agree to do that. It could be. But do you want a judge to decide that under this balancing test called the rule of reason? That is, of course, a risk that a manufacturer and retailer would take. So this policy shift that I was talking about in the federal law turned out to be a policy shift in the state law. So today, all agreements between competitors, that's called a horizontal relationship, agreements as to price, supply, and the exclusion of competitors, that's unlawful per se. That is true under state law. As to vertical relationships, again, I should probably just have a big, X on, or a cross on here, but I didn't want to, it's too religious. So vertical relationships, manufacturers to retailers, wholesalers, down to the consumer level, that vertical relationship of independent companies, that will be judged on a case-by-case basis under the rule of reason. Under the rule of reason. So this agreement problem that we've talked about, do we want to subject manufacturers and retailers to the specter of a court intervention? No, that's a problem, because nobody wants to take that risk. So I call it the agreement problem, and that's what you should call it. How do we avoid the agreement problem? Well, when is the agreement problem in front of us? If a manufacturer owns its product and it sells it to a retailer and the title transfers, meaning that the risk of loss transfers as well to the retailer, it's your product, the retailer, right? I have this thing that controls the other thing, right? If I own it and I give it to you, and you have it and you own it, do you have a right then to do with what you want with the product? Let's bring it to another thing, cars. I buy a car from a dealer. I use it for 2 years and I sell it to Kathleen. Does she have a right to do with that car as she pleases? Meaning she can destroy the car because she doesn't drive very well. She could sell the car. She could loan the car. She could lease the car. Could I, as the former owner, tell Kathleen at what price she can sell that product? Can I make her agree with me that when I sell it to her, whenever she sells it again, never to sell it below a certain price? Can I do that? Now, this raises some of the issues we're talking about today. What happens if I decide that I don't want to sell Kathleen the car, I just want to let her use the car. Can I now make those same demands on her? It's still my car. Can I tell Kathleen, you can't sell it, you can't do with what you please, please don't destroy the car, right? If you are advertising for a certain price for the car to sell it, here's the minimum that I would allow you to advertise. Can I do that? You see the difference between title passing and title retention? That's not good what I just did. I was told not to do that. Right? Don't tap yourself that way. Yeah. 3 strikes and I'm out. I hope this goes well. So if title is being held by the manufacturer as to products, it can tell the retailer or wholesaler what it wants to do. If title passes to the retailer, do the rules change? Okay. If title passes to the retailer, what types of agreements, if any, or policies can be issued by the manufacturer to the retailer that would allow for this relationship to go forward consistent with my car analogy? Does it make more sense now that we use a car rather than something else? Title passing, ownership, risk of loss, when it passes to the downstream buyer, the retailer, the wholesaler, it changes the game, right? I should be able to do what I want. I'm the retailer. I bought the product. It's mine. I can do what I want with it. The manufacturer should say, boy, I'm glad I sold that product. Now it's off my shelf. I have no more risk of loss, and I got paid for it. That dynamic has changed, right? Well, let's kind of keep going forward and see if we can explore this a little bit. How do companies in the manufacturing and retailer position, how do they sell products? 3 basic models, and these names are not important because some they call these distribution systems differently, and there's other ones in addition to these. A direct model. A direct model is the manufacturer who's selling directly to the consumer, bypassing a retailer, right? Manufacturer holds the title, doesn't give it away until the consumer says, yep, I buy. No retailer involved. The agency model. The manufacturer holds the title, uses the retailer or wholesaler as merely an agent, and says, here are the terms in which I can sell this product. It's never passed, the title and risk of loss never passes to the retailer. Then the consumer buys, the manufacturer delivers. You see what we're doing on these 2 models, both the direct and the agency model? The manufacturer holds title. Now we get to the wholesale model. And again, the name isn't important. We can call it anything you want. The manufacturer sells the product along with the title and the risk of loss to the retailer. The retailer then is responsible for selling that product. It's their product. What level of control, if any, can the manufacturer place? Now we're getting to the good stuff, right? So the law, the antitrust laws, have looked at these issues. And a couple things have come very clear. One is, in 1919, the Supreme Court said, look, a manufacturer can do business with whomever it wants to and decide whatever terms it wants to. And if there is non-compliance by the retailer, the manufacturer can terminate. It's called Colgate. What's the hard part about Colgate? It's completely unilateral, meaning the manufacturer makes the terms, says to the retailer, these are my terms, take it or leave it. For non-compliance, there's automatic termination. How hard is that? That's real tough. Lawful? You bet. That Colgate policy is lawful because the antitrust laws are bumping into other rights, which is, I have the right to do business while it's my product. And before I release the product to you, these are my terms. Is there bargaining once the retailer accepts the product? Absolutely not. Is there discussion? Absolutely not. Does the retailer get to say, but? Absolutely not. That's a very difficult policy to enforce. Lawful. What about a manufacturer suggested price? What happens when the manufacturer says, hey, retailer, here's a suggested price for you? It means a suggested retail price. You have the product, you own the product, it's your product, risk of loss is with the retailer. The manufacturer says, here's the suggested price. Can the manufacturer say, you have an obligation to sell at MSRP or I'll terminate you? Uh-oh. There goes the suggested part of manufacturer suggested retail price. Manufacturers should only suggest retail price policies unless they're going to implement a Colgate policy, which is very specific. So in distributor agreements between manufacturers and retailers, where MSRP is raised, it's a suggestion only and the retailer is free to set its own retail price. Now we get to MAP. Probably the most difficult policies. Difficult in understanding what it is and what it is not. It is an advertised policy. It's an advertised policy. The manufacturer creates an advertised policy program with the retailer. Again, the manufacturer sets those dimensions, what those terms are as to advertising only. That is not the retail selling price. It is the advertised price only. The retailer is free to set its own resale or retail price. It is what is advertised that a MAP pertains to, not the retail selling price. There's a difference. Is it a legitimate advertising program? You better be. What does it mean to be a legitimate advertised program? Meaning that the manufacturer is contributing things in an advertising program. Contributes dollars. It contributes IP, intellectual property. So retailer buys a product from a manufacturer and it says, I have the right to the image of your product. No, you don't. No, you don't. You've bought the product, you have not purchased the intellectual property unless that's part of the deal. Can you use the image of the product to sell that product and other products? Not without the permission of the manufacturer. Ergo, that's the basis for MAP. See, the manufacturer sold you the product, entitled to it and risk of loss to that product. They retain the rights to image. They retain the rights to the name. They retain all intellectual property rights. So a manufacturer can bargain with a retailer and they can say, as to advertising, here is what I'm contributing. Money, things, intellectual property. Because I've contributed that, I have the right to negotiate with you on what the minimum advertised price is. Purely lawful. Purely lawful. I've seen MAP used inappropriately. MAP is a cover for a retail selling price limitation. No, it's not. It should never be. Now you're wandering into the Colgate problem. Now you're wandering into the agreement problem. Because an agreement between a manufacturer and a retailer can pose an antitrust problem for you. Yes, I agree, I will not sell below a certain price. Well, that's a retail selling price. That's an agreement because we both have said, yes, we can do that. That's a problem because maybe federal law will say, well, let's test that. Let's see if this is a pro-competitive benefit to the consumer. I'm not so sure. How to stay safe. MAP policies pertain to advertised price. And if you want to be doubly sure, you engraft a Colgate policy on top of a MAP policy so that the manufacturer unilaterally decides all pricing, unilaterally decides the terms and conditions, and says to the retailer, here is the policy, take it or leave it. It's not required, but it's the safest way of approaching these policies. Now, this is the law. This is the concept of the law. Hopefully, some of it makes a little more sense than it did when you walked in here. What about the practical side of some of these things? The law has changed. Public policy has changed. There's been a shift. What are we trying to protect with the antitrust laws? Well, this theory of competition, consumer welfare, is it true? Sounds academic, sounds good. Guy in the suit just said, hey, here are the rules. But is it real? Does it really matter to the consumer whether these rules are applied? Should the lowest price be the most important thing? Is that what we're all searching for consumer welfare, lowest price of products? That's the public policy debate. Hopefully we're going to generate some of that in a few seconds. So brick and mortar versus internet retailing. Historically, manufacturers have sold through through retailers that are brick and mortar. Now, the advent of the internet selling, we have some collision, some light, some heavy. Are we battling each other? Is there a problem as to the manufacturer? How can the manufacturer deal with the problems of brick and mortar versus internet retailing? So, Mike, I would like to ask you, from your perspective as a manufacturer, should the manufacturer be able to retain control over retail advertised pricing?
Yes, I strongly agree with that. It presents a lot of challenges, more than you could imagine.
Okay.
The biggest problem is, well, if I can go back a little bit in history, when we put our retail pricing policy in 5 years ago, there was no software out there to identify who was selling under. So I get up early in the morning, and on Saturday mornings I'd get up and it would be 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'd make a cup of coffee and I'd sit on my laptop, catching up on sports and going to Amazon and looking up all the different Calico Critter items and writing down the names of retailers and sending off an email. And we had a very flexible policy where we were trying to work with the retailers to say, you're under our MAP pricing, and there was a lot of finger pointing going on. Well, Amazon's doing it, and this person's doing it, and I'm only this amount, and so forth. So after working and banging my head against the wall for about 6 months, we turned around a little bit and we said, okay, if we're going to have this policy, we're going to enforce it. We turned around to Amazon, we said, we're stopping your purchase orders until your pricing is right, and for 2 months we never shipped another item to them until they got every single item up, and this was still a manual process. And if a retailer was discounting, we identified them and we cut them off. When I say cut them off, if it's $19.95 was the minimum price and you were at $19.94, we stopped. And we took a lot of heat for this. I'm 1 penny off, okay? Okay, is 2 cents okay, and 3 cents, and 5 cents, and 50 cents? Where's the bottom? So we had to take a very strong position. Today, particularly over the past 18 months to 2 years, the software has helped us quite a bit in identifying and knowing when people are discounting an item. The next and the newest challenge that is you'll hear about is that we didn't know who they are. We monitored not just Amazon, but Google Shopping and eBay, and it goes on and on. And to identify would take our 2 or 3 people full-time jobs to hunt down and find out. We spent, I think Tangi's here someplace, $5,000 or $6,000 last year buying our own product to try to find out where these people that were discounting and not fulfilled by Amazon, where the product was coming from. Fulfilled by Amazon creates a whole nother level, because customers don't call us up and say, I'm opening a Fulfilled by Amazon account. They also don't use their own name. So it is challenging, except that we have a very long view. Why do we do it? Why do we put this in place? Why would I put this in place? Well, if I can, you would think if I can sell more if the price is is cheaper. Fundamentally, that's true. But we have two markets, and we have been around for 45 years, and we built our business on the brick and mortar. And somebody that wants to open up in a cornfield in Iowa and order product and buy and sell it for $2 or $3 profit because they can make money does not serve my company well. We put a lot of time and energy into developing our Calico Critter brand. And so we try to find a balance between price and support and keep a level playing field between retailers and internet. The internet's here, it's not going to go away. We just have to keep it level. And what we look at and we say, you know, if a customer is in your store and they see that if they pull out their phone and they look, or they, in a line like Calico Critters, where our research shows that people buy that line, you know, like 70% of the people buy the line 16 times. That means it's not a one-off product. They're going to come back and buy Calico Critters 16 times. That I don't want them to buy the product and find it in your store. Go on the internet and find out that it's $3 cheaper, or $2 cheaper, or $5 cheaper, because you're helping me build the brand. And I want them to come back to you. And if they see that here's the price, and they go on Amazon, or they go on eBay, or they go and do a Google search and have the aggregators come up, and the price is the same, then they know that they can support their local retailer. But it's also very important there's a two-way street, is to work at that MAP price, if possible. Because if people come in to see our brand, for example, and you are above that price, what does that say about your store? And everything else in your store, not just that item. So there's a balance, and it's a partnership that we have to work together on to be fair. Would it be fair to me to give you a 20% margin? Well, I could put a MAP policy out there, and it turns a 20% margin, and I'd sell a lot, but ultimately that's not enough for you to survive. So there's a balance between the traditional model that specialty and independent retailers work, and between what is the right price. And we have to work together on that so that we have this balance.
Dee, you're a manufacturer. How do you feel about the question about manufacturers' control over retail selling prices and advertising pricing?
Yeah, you know, Todd, when you sent these questions ahead for us to look at and prep, I sat down with my business partner, Wayne, and we just thought, wow, these are great questions for us to think about as we're getting started on this process. And the first thing we thought about was the context of how we answer, because the word control is a pretty strong word. And we thought about the idea of a fair value chain. And what we were thinking about was fair value for everybody in the chain, meaning the factory worker who actually sews our product and makes it by hand earns a fair wage. We can earn a fair margin selling it to you. You can earn a fair margin selling it to a consumer, and they end up with a product that they feel like is of a good market value, is not so overpriced that they don't want to buy it. So that's kind of the context that we were thinking about our answers in. And I think, you know, you kind of referred to that too, Mike, with the balance. And, you know, that balance is maybe changing a bit. I mean, in the past, in 2006, when we started, first of all, if somebody called to place an order, we shipped it. We didn't ask a lot of questions. We didn't say, what are your DBAs, and do you have a website, and do you have a, you know, we didn't have to do that. And I know just even this week, Kari, who's back there, she said, gee, somebody called to place an order, and I can't find them, and she won't tell me her DBAs, and so suddenly we're doing business in a whole different way. I mean, in the past, we could sell something for $10 to a neighborhood store, and we could kind of have an idea that it would be on the shelf for about $19.99. And we could, if we were working with a larger big box retailer, we kind of knew if we sold a different item to them for $10, we could probably see it on the shelf for $14.99. And we kind of understood why, more efficiencies, they don't have help in the store. Our neighborhood stores had all kinds of help in the store, and it was information rich and lots of service. And it was, I don't want to oversimplify, but it was kind of sort of in balance. And if one of our specialty stores, our neighborhood toy stores, decided they don't want to carry this anymore, it's a good item, but I got too much of it, and they wanted to have a big sale and move it out, had a local effect. And that's kind of, it was sort of this thing, and it just sort of worked. And then we had the internet stores come in. And let's say Amazon, yes, and also small internet stores. And so we sold the item at $10, and we saw it for $13. And then we saw it for $12. And then we saw it for $10.50. And suddenly all the influence, I did it for this.
I feel better.
All the influence that we had with our wholesale pricing model was gone. And but the hard part was this convergence of information rich. I think many of you know the zip-in product, right? Try to explain one, you're kind of unzipping it in the air, you're doing stuff. You know, it's a difficult product to explain. It needs help, it needs service. So here in the information-rich environment on the internet, you could have a video, it could be explained, but there was very low cost for those retailers to fulfill the items. So brought the price down. But my answer is too, yes, we need a way to have some sort of influence to help preserve that value chain for all the people in the value chain, for all of us in there. And you know, I'm sure many of you knew that in October, Amazon posted losses of $274 million. That was their October report. There's been a couple of earnings reports since then where they've showed margins, maybe 0.5% in profitability. So who's benefiting here? Everybody in the value chain is being hurt. Who is actually benefiting, and is this sustainable? I know some analysts I read now are starting to kind of say, is there going to be a correction here? Is this going to work? It's the reality of where we are today. And our option is, I don't know, MAP on top of Colgate and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And Todd's telling me, Dee, I think you have a Colgate policy. And I'm like, no, I like Crest better. I think, sure. I mean, you know, I wish
That's
I would have
consumer
paid
preference.
I wish I would have paid better attention in economics and, you know, in my legal classes. This is overwhelming what our options are to try to get that control. Very complicated.
So Mike and Dee, two manufacturers, and they are in charge of lots of people, and they are creating a distribution channel system, not just in the United States, North America, worldwide. They're thinking, okay, what are the things that I have to think about? They're not thinking, well, how can I best benefit? They're thinking, how does this best work with all of the people in the distribution chain? Some are brick and mortar retailers, some are internet retailers. How does the manufacturer reconcile, as Mike said, kind of have a level playing field? What you're hearing from the manufacturer's perspective, at least, is how best do we do this so that it's fair to both the retailers who have invested in employees and brick and mortar and shelf and education, and internet retailers who may have invested in some of that and maybe not. How about the retailer's perspective? Kate, if you could provide your insight and your thoughts about whether manufacturers should have some type of quote-unquote control over retail or advertised pricing.
I think there has to be a level of the playing field. I think when we testify in the Arizona Senate and we talk to senators and congressmen, I joke and say it's kind of like sending the Diamondbacks out in the ball field with 7 players against 9. And that's how I think a lot of us brick and mortars feel. I feel I'm a community store. I feel committed to people. And I think when you take a look at it, we are responsible for a lot of people. I have an accountant, I have a lawyer, I have all these other people. And we were talking about that. And I'm on the board of directors for Local First Arizona. And our director goes into ASU and she teaches college kids. She instructs them on the benefits of a community. And she's so passionate about what she does because she's tired of seeing things leave the community. And that's why I'm like huge in supporting a policy. And trust me, all these letters and words you have up here, work it out, make it work. Because I feel responsible for lots of people in the community. When a local person closes, there goes an account for your lawyer, supplier, sign guy, everybody hurts. And I think I would like to pay a lot less rent, but I think until a lot of the landlords across the country realize, I mean, $25 to $40 a square foot is what we're paying. I would die to have something for $5, $6 a square foot, but I won't get the consumer in there to see your product if I do that.
So this is interesting. Let's go back to the antitrust laws, the promotion of competition, the promotion of consumer welfare, pricing. You know, well, if we have a price agreement, see, we've destroyed competition. But when we're talking about prices, retail prices, both at the advertised and reselling level, I'm not hearing any of that. You see, I don't hear all the deleterious effect of these types of understandings. What I'm hearing are people trying to solve problems about what do you do when you're employing a bunch of people in a local community and you have a retail market and the retail market matters. Do we want consumers to have the lowest price for each product, and do consumers really benefit? I mean, really underscored. Do they really benefit from having the lowest price to them? Can achieving the lowest price destroy the very thing that the antitrust laws are designed to protect, which is the theory of competition? Do we go too far? In part, the Supreme Court has rethought that issue, and a policy shift occurred because they're rethinking, are lowest prices really the most important thing in the vertical distribution chain? Is there another way to look at this, that there may be benefit other than just lowest price, that we can't judge these things as unreasonable per se? I think the answer is yes. There are policy issues here that you're hearing from manufacturers and retailers. Does anybody, Mike, do you have an opinion about whether consumers are actually benefited from the absolute lowest price for your products?
I don't believe that they do. I think that there's the here and now, which we all live in far too much. If I lift and don't care about pricing, the long run is that one by one you'll drop my product lines because you can't compete with the small group of people who are willing to continue to lower prices. So what will happen is my distribution will get thinner and thinner, and as my distribution gets thinner and thinner, what are these people who are out there going to do? They'll raise prices. The prices will ultimately come back up. It might take a year, it might take 10 years for this to happen, but it will take a lot longer to bring back independent retailers, and pretty soon the price will be higher than what it would be if it becomes the monopoly that the government wants to get away from. And so now the prices go up, and it's worse because I only have one person or a handful of people selling my product. So I have higher credit risks. I have higher dependency on whether they like my product. So I'd have a short-term gain by doing this, maybe, but I'd have it would be a long-term disaster for our company.
Dee, same question. Thought process on, do consumers really benefit from the lowest price possible?
I think everybody likes to get a good deal, right? We all get excited when we can find something at a steal. So short term, it's a great thing. Long term, I don't know how we can sustain our value chain. We have to squeeze our factory. Let's get the price down. Guess what they say? Well, if we make it a little smaller, if we don't sew those edges and make sure we do all the refinement that we do when we make your stuff by hand, maybe we can do that. So what's going to happen to the quality of our product? What's going to happen? It's going to have to change if you have to keep squeezing down. So does that ultimately benefit the consumer to get a cheaper product? How about product safety? In our industry, what isn't more important to mom and dad than parents? Safety. That's kind of the other one that kind of gets out there that's pretty expensive to have to do, and those factory inspections and checking everything and making sure it's squeezing, and what happens? So ultimately, no.
I'm going to pretend to be a consumer for a second, and Kate and I are going to have a little colloquy. I have an iPhone, and I am interested in buying products that Mike and Dee have manufactured and distributed. And I've gone into your retail store, Kid Stop or Baby Stop, and I said, look, I would like someone to educate me on these products that I'm interested in buying. And Kate's folks, including Kate, have a world of information to provide to me. I become educated on the best product for my child. I then pull out my iPhone and find the lowest price and thank Kate for helping and buy it while I'm standing in her store through the internet, because I have a price adjustment that's below the price she was willing to offer delivered to my home. Kate, what is your feeling about that kind of thing?
Now, I'll tell you, 6 years ago, I probably would have said I'd match that price. But I don't anymore, because I tell them that my staff is worth it. I'll look at them and I say, well, how much? Do you like us on Facebook? Do you get our email newsletters? We do a lot of marketing and have a lot of great events. You need to get with us and know about us. And what is the price? Wow, that's a great price. But if you want it today and you want us to be here the next time you need something, sometimes we just have to do it a different way. And unfortunately, I think hanging around with Kimber, as I was telling Todd earlier, it's made me a little brazen. Sari, I think we agree. It's interesting when you think about it. I think we have to win people over to that we are worth something. We are worth more than $7, $8, $9, $10 an hour. I'm sorry, I work very hard. And when I read posts about people who are not making it or they're not earning money, I'm sorry, I just feel we're worth it, and that's why we train our employees, and we're not afraid to say, but we gift wrap. And I want to see an Amazon store wrap as good as us. That's all I can say, and it's free. So we're not afraid to turn the tide on them and say, do you get this from the internet? Do you get a handwritten note? Is it wrapped? Are you taken care of? And if it's wrong, will somebody suggest something different? You need to keep us around, and we're not afraid. We educate our employees to do that. So I'm sorry, Todd, I'm not going to match that price, but I'm going to take care of a lot of different benefits for you.
Thank you. I've reconsidered. I'll buy from you. Ron Solomon, owner of the Creditor Network and MapTrap. So should retailers be able to monitor retail pricing?
You mean should manufacturers be able to monitor?
Or retailers be able to monitor?
Sure. I think it's everybody's right to monitor whatever they want. It's obviously what you do with the data. I think I'd like, if possible, to show some of the
Sure.
data, because I think,
Yep.
you know, I've heard everybody who knows me knows I'm a fairly opinionated guy. So I'm going to try to really just stick to the facts and just present the picture, because
Advance, is it corporate advance? The one we go to the next one?
yeah, go for it. So really what we're talking about is, I think that retailers see the trees as opposed to the forest. And these numbers are real, based on 36 manufacturers being monitored over the last 5 months. We added an additional 90 manufacturers over the last month, really over the last few weeks, and the number grew to 6,879 marketplace sellers on eBay and Amazon alone selling children's products. All right, that's almost 7,000 companies. Now that's just in the last 5.5 months of this year. When we factor in numbers from last year, the number was up to 15,000. Okay, but we're taking them out because some of those included auction sites, and these don't include any auctions. These don't include any used products. It's a mix of FBA. It's also a very small mix of dedicated websites. Now, I also want to say that this is not just a retail-only problem. When we got into this, we really didn't, we had no idea how much data we were going to be finding and what it was that we were going to be looking at. So I just want to say, it's not just the retailers, it's the manufacturers too. Over 400 Astor retailers have functional dedicated e-commerce sites. At least 30% of those retailers have one or more additional Amazon or eBay sites in which they don't identify who they are. 30% of the manufacturers at this show have sites on Amazon and they don't say who they are either. Now, I'm not going to say whether or not any of these people are violating MAP. I just say it to illustrate everybody is doing it. So it's a huge, pervasive issue, and it should concern everybody in this room, retailers and manufacturers alike. And you should all be monitoring, I believe, just to get to the truth of it. What's the decision to do? I personally believe in information. You can't really make a considered, educated decision about anything unless you have information with which to make that decision upon. So, that said, with this, I also want to point out that we're not monitoring currently a company called Rakuten, which was Buy.com, Google, or Yahoo. And now we know, I don't know how many of you know this, but Sears, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and several other large, well-known brands, retail brands have gotten into the marketplace market. So if you take this number and then you extrapolate and you take these 6,000 here and then you spread them across, now you're talking about 24,000 virtual doors, okay, or more. So it's commoditizing children's products. I'm just speaking of children's products. So it's commoditizing the products, and the only distinguishing, what we have discovered is that the only distinguishing branding factor for an online retailer is price. That's it. They don't have, you're talking about the free riding where they come in and you've got an educated staff, right? So the consumer comes in and learns about it. Well, the internet doesn't have that. So the only thing they have branding-wise is price. So that's why they're driving the price down to get people to buy their products, okay? I won't get into the opinions. Okay. So this being said, so as you can see here, let's just base this, so we can see 65% of the retailers are on Amazon. The change? Yes, it changed? Okay, so distinct violators. So of this data set, of the 5,000, of the 4,962 merchants with children's products for 36 companies, 4,418 are MAP violators. That's almost 85%. So that means pretty much you can say everybody's doing it, all right? And I'm not saying they're all doing it habitually. I'm sure some of them are flash sites. I'm sure some of them are doing closeouts, and it's legitimate. They just didn't tell the manufacturer they were going to be doing it. But it is huge. Of these, obviously, Amazon has the lion's share. So here's 186,000 violations. Did I get that right? Okay, I can't see it. So that's 186,000 violations just in the first part of the year, 5 months. When we added the new manufacturers, we came to 232,242 violations. All right, this is individual MAP violations, right? So these are companies who have MAP policies, and so nobody's listening to them. They don't really know how to monitor it properly. Well, they're monitoring it, but again, with such a high volume, how do you enforce this? It's just an incredible volume. So that's why I want you all to see the forest from the trees. You're all focusing on one individual. So it is a huge problem, and it is going to hurt manufacturers' brands, because all the brands are only going to be sold not on value, not on selling features, but on price alone. So it's becoming Walmart, really. The average MAP violation. Now let's just say that, and I know this is probably not okay to say for Todd, but let's just say that MAP is a percentage off of MSRP, right? Is this right? Yeah, so let's just say that MAP is, on average, 10 to 15 points off of MSRP, all right? So what we're monitoring for is prices below 10 to 15% off MSRP, which means if the average violation is 16%, that means that the average violation is 25 to 31% off of MSRP. So from a manufacturer's perspective, how can a manufacturer create product with no margin? From a retailer's perspective, how can a retailer sell product with no margin? It seems like it's a zero-sum game, but all of us in this room lose. So again, the facts lead us to the narrative that something has to be done, and I believe it starts with the monitoring and the identification of who these people are. eBay has the highest volume percentage, 21%, so that's pretty rough. And the number of eBay violators is growing. The number of eBay stores is growing, and I think it's because companies are focusing on Amazon, and so as the retailers on Amazon get shut down, they're migrating. That's just my opinion. I don't know for sure. Now, here's some interesting information potentially about Amazon specifically. So about one third of Amazon sellers are FBAs, fulfillment by Amazon. And these sellers pay 15% plus higher fees to Amazon. But obviously they gain advantages in product placement, warehousing services, fulfillment, shipping, and other areas, so they don't really have to be the barriers to entry for a retailer. I was just talking to Mike, where the barriers to entry for manufacturers in the toy industry has risen. CPSC, all the MAP violations, all the new safety regs and everything. It's really gotten harder to be a manufacturer. So it used to be anybody like me could walk in and make a game and I'd be okay. Now it's a lot more difficult, but I think the problem for the retail side is that the barriers to entry have really gone down. You don't even have to buy the product. You don't even have to touch the product ever. You can just have Amazon do it, period, end of subject, and you can hurt everybody at the same time. So now as far as the violating, FBA is not the worst. They're not the most egregious. The non-FBA guys on Amazon are the worst violators. So 73% of the violations that take place on Amazon are non-FBA sellers. Now, talked to a bunch of people. They put up the shipping. So they'll lower the price, but then they'll add a lot more shipping. But the engines aren't looking for that. They're looking for the price, which is why people are going to those companies. Then you can add in things like seller ratings, and maybe they won't buy, maybe they will buy from these accounts, from these retailers. But again, what are we getting to? The only distinguishing factor is price. And that's not fair to the manufacturer. And now we get to the percentages. Amazon and FBA represent the lower end of the violators, okay, of the violations themselves. So you got 92,000 non-FBA violations versus 18,000 for Amazon itself. And then the last one is, although they say they adhere to MAP, Amazon violates more than the FBAs. So 15% on Amazon versus 12% for Amazon FBAs. Obviously, they hog the buy box. I've been taught that by my friend Jerry many times. And that's what they do. So this only fuels and perpetuates this incredible race to the bottom. So those are the facts. We can't really argue with them. And I know Todd was going to ask some questions as to whether or not I felt that manufacturers and retailers should monitor. And I absolutely believe that they should, because I think that what's happening is that obviously the internet's growing. Through the creditors network, we see manufacturers, the way it works is a manufacturer who opens up a new account, puts a query into the system. The system then finds other manufacturers who've done business with that account and asks them to provide information on the payment side as to whether or not they've, what are their high and low credit limits, do they pay their bills on time, et cetera, are there any collection alerts on these companies? And then we take and we generate sales leads. And what we've seen is a great reduction in the number of sales leads for brick and mortar, but a very large increase in the number of sales leads for internet stores. And we identify internet stores by having ship to addresses that are residential or post office boxes as opposed to brick and mortar commercial locations that can be identified. So I'm concerned that brick and mortar is really suffering a bit of malaise right now, and I don't really know what you guys can do about it, but I just want to point out that I do think it's an issue. And I think this is a great first step toward it. You all have to watch each other's back, guys, because this is going on.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Ron.
Sure.
Dee, did you have something that you wanted to add?
I did. I wanted to add one thing, and I don't want it to sound like, Ron, that I'm picking on you, because I think I believe that we have to monitor, and we're going to do it, and we are doing it. But I also want to pick on something that Kate said, and I don't know if you said it to everybody, or if it was just when you and I were talking earlier about we have to do also more than just think about price. And in preparing for the panel, I found some data that I wanted to share very quick. There's a company called Wonderful Media that did a survey of 1,000 shoppers. And they released this report last December. And they found that 91% of the shoppers that they talked to had actually gone into a brick and mortar store because of something they saw online. Now, Amazon tells us this in their sales pitch when we go to their meetings, but this was the first time I actually found some data to support it. And the data said that 60% of the people went in because they got an email that said there was a promotion going on. 59% received a coupon, and so they wanted to go into the store to redeem that coupon. I got one from Carson Terry Scott, who's in Chicago, and I went last week, actually. I was one of those people. 56% saw an ad online, and 55% searched for a product and found a store location. So I think that a lot of internet retailers are certainly taking advantage of the internet and the medium there. And I spent 20 years in software. I know some of you know that before I was lucky enough to get involved in the toy industry. So it's being, in technology is sort of second nature to me. But I want to sort of think, I want to have a positive thing we can do. Yes, we got to monitor, but as a manufacturer, we want to make, market, and sell toys. I don't want to be a policeman. And I know Ron's going to help me be a policeman, and I know we're going to do all that stuff, but I also want to do other stuff. I want to have fun. I want to get out there, and I want to use that internet tool to drive people into the neighborhood stores that we do want to support. Our community is very important to us. Mito was embraced. In 2006, we had so many people in our booth, the police came to clear the aisle because we were a fire hazard. We've been embraced by our neighborhood toy stores, and we want to support them. So Kathleen had contacted me a few months ago, and she said, we're thinking about doing a thing in conjunction with Neighborhood Toy Store. We had meetings about it, about doing a coupon, and we never got to play it out. Well, in addition to the Amazon validation, this is validation for us too, Kathleen. We got to do that. I looked specifically at toy. They kind of said who prefers to buy online, who prefers to buy in the store, and who is either, who'll go, has no preference. 35% of people said that they wanted to buy their toy online. They preferred. 22% said they preferred to buy in the store. 45% had no preference. I say we take some action. We use this tool, and we go get that 45%. Yes, we keep doing the monitoring and stuff too, but let's do some other things that are just focused on the price. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comment? I agree. Can I say something?
What's up?
What's up? Can I say something?
Sure. Go ahead.
No, I agree with you 100%, Dee. I think monitoring is only a part of it, but I think that manufacturers need to look at the online retail as a distribution channel, no different than a mall or a main street. And if Amazon is the anchor or if Yahoo is the anchor, you wouldn't sell to 50 stores in the mall, right? That would just be shooting yourself in the foot. So yeah, you do have to do that, I agree, but it is still imperative, and I'm not just preaching the monitoring side, because I know it's just adding more work to something that's already a very difficult thing. But I think it's really important that retailers learn how to differentiate themselves from an online branding perspective in some way, shape, or form based on something other than price. And I think that manufacturers need to stop just getting excited about purchase orders and look at who's ordering, where they are, and how it's going to affect the ultimate distribution and branding. So just to add to you.
Mike, you have something to add, I think.
Yeah, just before we jump into questions.
Sure.
Last year, it's costly for manufacturers to do MAP pricing and enforce it. Setting aside the people time of our existing employees through legal research and monitoring, we spent nearly $50,000 on a single line. And so it's a challenge. They talked about, and it isn't just in Amazon. When we started our monitoring, the Sears and Kmart's and eBay's and so forth came up, and we have found a very successful way to address those. Amazon has some other challenges that we're working on. One of the major challenges is I'm going to introduce this product, and I know that what I have to sell it for, and let's say I have to sell this for $15. I'm going to sell it to you for $15. So I sit in my office and I say, if I want to map this, what's the map? What should the price be? Well, you know, it'd be great if we could put it at $50 or $60, but is it worth $50 or $60? Is it worth $30 or $27.99? So there's a balance, and it's a challenge. And I ask that you be open-minded when you see MAP policies, and that you look at them and you say, well, if the manufacturer is going to support that price, it may not be 100% of the margin that I would like to get for this, but it's a reasonable margin. And it's reasonable because they do this and this and this, including supporting that price. And I don't have to compete. The other half of it is I think that there's even more responsibilities from the manufacturer's end. And for example, I think that manufacturers, if we're going to be striking a balance, also work to support, if you're going to advertise out to your local community and to promote our products, that there's a place for us. We actually help support if you do promotions on our brands, that when you sell the product and you've had a discount on that, that if you've arranged with us in advance, that we will help support that monetarily. But you'd be amazed with the resistance that we get from, oh, yeah, that's going to mean I have to collect email, or how do I do an email, or how do I do this? But I think manufacturers are willing to support these kinds of activities, and it's hard to get the right program and to get all of these things functioning. But I think that every manufacturer that is in this building over the next few days trying to sell you product is really open to doing this. At least I hope that they are. But as for, I think, Dee and myself, we've spoken quite a bit in preparing for this, and I think that our companies know where our future lies, and it is not with the internet, it's with especially the independent retailer.
Thank you, Mike. So before, when I introduced this subject, I said this is brick and mortar stores versus internet retailing. Is it really a two-sided coin? I don't think so. It's more like a ball. There's a lot of facets, a lot of sides, and depending on how you turn it, it looks different. It's still round, but the colors and the shapes and everything about it look different. I don't think there's a consensus on this subject. There probably never will be. There's going to be a perspective, and you heard 4 different perspectives today. That's probably multiplied by all the people in here. How manufacturers and retailers and consumers all can coexist, one within the law, but also from a business standpoint. We hope that this has been helpful and educational. I want to personally thank Kathleen McHugh for inviting me to this and participating here. It's been very helpful, and I hope that you found it to be helpful. Astra's done a great job in promoting education. This is one of those programs. We're open to questions. I realize it's about 6:25. I don't know what is in store for you going forward, but if there are any questions, we have a person with a microphone. Don't be afraid.
Thank you. So Mike and I talked about this in person, but I'm going to put it out there. What would be so terrible on a $15 wholesale item to make the map $29.99? So if somebody in Manhattan wants to sell it for $34.99, they could. Maybe I want to sell it for $32. Maybe you want to be really sharp and you're going to sell it for $29. What would be so terrible about having a map price that would be a little higher margin?
I think, Mike, that goes to you.
Well, I think it starts at the beginning. If I'm introducing a new product and I put a $15 wholesale on it, and you're immediately thinking, it's a bit of a training, all of us training our minds to think a little bit different. If I say 15, you look at it and say, that's not worth $30. I don't think that's worth $30. That value judgment is made every time you select a product. You'd say, I'd really like it to be, $13.50. I think it's a $26.99 item. And I say, well, I can't do $13.50. Okay? And one of the things you're thinking is, well, what do I do on this? We're both thinking this. I'd like to carry the product. You'd like to carry it and have retail. Now, this is an individual product. The challenge, and I'm going to admit this, only part of our line is MAP, is that the challenge is, how do we strike that balance? And if we are able to move one price point, but you're not going to get undercut on the internet side, you may make a choice to take that item or not. You're always allowed to. Under a MAP policy, keep in mind, if I'm mapping it, you can still sell that item at $29.95 or $32.95. You can sell upwards. I don't care how much you sell it for. I just am trying to protect the bottom. There is a mixed message with that. When you do that, you do run risk. There's a little bit of, we're introducing a whole series of products in January of next year. The first thing I have to do before I even release it to you is I have to set that item up on Amazon. And you say, well, why do you have to do that? Because if I don't do it, one of the 400 retailers is going to do it. And if I want to control my destiny on that item, I better register it on Amazon and have it under my name and own that ASIN number. So I have to register my products. And as does everybody out there. So it starts, it starts there. And I know that if I sell the product, it's going to get put on Amazon. And I know that there's going to be price pressure. By putting together a MAP policy and saying, this is the real, if you think it's worth across the broad market of from East Coast to West Coast, if it's universally believed that item is worth $30, it would probably be mapped at $30. But there may be items, and my strategy would be, there are items that, it can be one price point lower. And overall, there's that mix. On our Calico Critter line, it's the overall, in an average mix of business, is about 47.6% margins, even though some items, the families in particular, are below a full markup line. And so for this small amount of margin. Now, if an item isn't turning for you, and maybe it turns well enough, maybe you're happy, just as happy selling 10 pieces at a higher margin than you are 20 pieces at a slightly lower. Be my guest. That's your decision.
Let's jump to another question.
Hi, I'd like to have this question go to the entire board. Really, there are only two commonalities, I guess, in this room. We're all ASTRA members, and we all agree it's a complicated issue that's not going to be solved overnight. So my question really is what, from a legal standpoint, Todd, can ASTRA do? Can it enforce things? Can you just comment on that? And then from the other members of the staff, and Ron also, if you can maybe make some suggestions, what the manufacturers and retailers feel ASTRA should be doing for you as members.
Now, from a legal standpoint, ASTRA shouldn't be doing anything but educating. ASTRA's purpose as a trade association and its purpose in its business is a collection of independent companies. Those companies need to act independently. And the educational side of the component is a wonderful thing. It's when ASTRA starts to group independent companies together and we start down the wrong road. So the narrow answer to your question is ASTRA in itself, other than to provide education, should not get involved in the idea of retail pricing itself. Somebody else may have an opinion about it.
That's a very good question, because if somebody drops below MAP, what can I do? I can only do one thing, and that is not sell them anymore. That's the only thing I can do. So if somebody comes in, a brick and mortar retailer comes in and they decide, I've had enough, I'm going to jump on this Amazon Fulfilled by Amazon bandwagon. Our company doesn't even ship to on behalf of Fulfilled by Amazon accounts to Amazon. If we're going to give you a freight program, you have to go and ship it from your own store location. But once you've made that decision, now you've done business with us for a while, and you say, well, here's a hot product, and you order a whole bunch of it, but it's discounted. I have nothing I can do except sit there and hear from 20 other retailers that this guy now, here's a new retailer discounting. Even if I know who it is, I can't sue them, I can't do anything other than not do business in the future. That's just, if you're wondering why it takes so long sometimes for pricing differences to go away, or it's because I have to wait for them to run out of stock.
Anybody else? Kate?
I'd like to add on to that, though. I think the one thing that I've learned in the last couple of years is people who will walk in the arena to protect their product, people who will put an MSRP or an MAP out there. My husband will tell you one of the first things I'm going to ask you is, do you protect your products? That tells me if you believe in them or not. Your poor reps walk into my store, and the first thing I do is Google your toys. I sit there and I Google and I say, okay, this won't pay my manager. This won't even pay the rent. So I think a decision has to be made in this arena where we're going to stand, and that's the most powerful thing out there is the pricing. It's such a difficult thing to address, yet it's such a killer of a thing in our industry. And great toys are not making it to our shelves where we incubate them and make them the great toys. And I think that's something that really needs to be addressed, and I'd love to see manufacturers, and you're going to have to police. And we police. And we're just going to have to keep battling it. But I think if we continue to battle as a group, and with Kathleen's help and the ASTRA staff, the education to senators and congressmen is key. So when you think these letters don't count, they do. And get behind them and push, because we're not going to have the toys on the shelf if we can't sell them to pay the rent.
Another question?
I have a question. Mike, you've done a great job with Calico. Have you started to review the other products such as Caduzzi? And I got a line in my store of all those nice yellow boxes, and everybody is starting to give them away online.
Yes, actually, the first step was we've had the Calico policy in place for a long time. And as I said, this was, my Saturday morning routine. Prices go down on Saturday mornings in the last week of the month, by the way, on Amazon. The challenge was when we put a policy out there, there's an expectation, and I think a correct one, that we enforce that policy. And it's the identification. When we first started, most people who were selling on Amazon, most of it was through their own store, and most of it was using their own name. Okay, so they were building their brand and their brand name. Then about 2 years ago, it really jumped off where individuals came in and people and our retailers started selling, but they were using different names, and we did not know who they were. So I had an existing policy that we'd worked hard and to keep in place, and even if you go today and look at Calico items, you'll see maybe 40 people selling at the same price, and you'll see some outliers out there. Those outliers are generally individuals who buy at store sales, and they'll sell it for $1 or $2 less, and they're very low quantity, but they're outliers, and consumers, we think, see that they're outliers. So we have all these compliant people and then these two people, and they think they're shady. But going back a year and a half ago, it was an identification problem. We spent money buying our own products to figure out who these people were. We're currently reviewing how and we can implement and should and how we can implement and broaden this policy. And there's a lot of aspects to the policy. You know, how long is something mapped? When I say how long, as long as we're actively selling, it should be mapped. And what happens if we discontinue a product? Does a map continue beyond that? How long? What's the lifespan of a map policy? Do I introduce something and I say I'm going to map this for introductory period of time and then not map it anymore? There's a lot of different marketing aspects and challenges that we face. But up to this point, it has been identification. It's understanding who the people are that are the sellers, because I have no ramification to shut them off if I don't know who they are. And that's the only way I can stop.
I have one other question. Dee, you brought up about Amazon and their October loss of 2012. Well, it's been harder. What's been going on with Amazon? There's not a level playing field anymore. What they've done is they've hogged the buy box, and we've been left with inventory, and one customer has resulted by Amazon issuing purchase orders, and the glass, we don't come back. Only Amazon comes back to the manufacturers and continues buying products from the manufacturers while we sit with inventory on Amazon and obtain, just getting storage charges on our products that are there, FBA.
Kathleen, did you have something you wanted to say? Okay.
I know we'll be wrapping this up because we've got to go on to the next thing. This has been really an interesting conversation. But I wonder, from a manufacturer perspective, if you have any advice, when we talked about policing and everything, but what about before you get to the policing? What about, how are you dealing differently with new customers now? What kind of advice can you give manufacturers before they sell that product to a new customer?
Dee?
Well, quickly, because I know we all want to go.
Yes.
We've had to change our whole new customer. We like I think I said when I was speaking earlier, we would get an order and we would fill it in 2006, and didn't have to ask it but a couple of credit questions. Now we try to do a bunch of research on. Are you a fulfiller? Who do you do business as? Do you do all these kinds of things? So starting a new customer relationship, and guess what? It can take hours to do that work for a $100 order. And if it's a $100 order from a customer that we want to work with, So we're doing it. But again, it's hitting us in a bad way, in a difficult way. And what if we miss? And what if they didn't really tell us that they do sell on Amazon anyway? And what if they have both a brick and mortar and this? And so it's very difficult. We're trying. I mean, Kate just said selective distribution. We're trying that. We're trying the MAP Colgate thing. We're trying in all these different things to do the right thing. And we are going to police, and we're going to do everything that we can. It just feels it's a tough thing. It's not a panacea.
Another question.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go back to the setting of the MAP pricing because, quite honestly, I don't think that question was completely answered to my satisfaction. You know, you say that you look at it and you see, you know, this is what you perceive to be the retail value, and so you set the MAP pricing at below the keystone, what is known as the keystone. But I've seen that seems to be like the trend. And I have to wonder why, because before internet, you used to think that that was the MAP pricing, even though MAP pricing didn't have a word. You know, it was like we bought it for $15, we sold it at the $29.99. The retailers got their margins. Now the MAP pricing is never at that keystone. And as a retailer, you say, okay, it's 47.5. That's 3.5%. That's my manager's salary there, or that could be my salary. Retailers, because we, Kate talked about the rents that we pay. Retail brick and mortars, we're on a very fine edge of profitability, and we lose 3.5%. That's a big hit. I know I have been watching my margins much better. I've become, because of Astra, a better retailer, and being able to, on a month-to-month basis, looking at my margin. What does my margin have to be in order to remain in business? It's not MAP pricing. Retailers are having a hard time, brick and mortars, surviving on the MAP pricing. Kate, you're not prepared for this question, but I think you're a smart enough retailer that you can answer this. What do you feel is the margin that retailers have to be able to get in order to stay in business as a brick and mortar?
I don't think you can set a margin. I think you're going to have to take a look across the board, see what will work in your store, and unfortunately, it may mean cutting out the toys that don't get you the margin. And I've learned that heavily in the baby industry. I was shocked in the baby industry. You guys have no idea. We live on 20 to 25 points. And we just closed a 14,400 square foot store that used to show 42 vignettes of beautiful cribs and bedding, and we now are in 4,200 square feet with off-site warehousing. We don't warehouse for the manufacturers anymore. We have changed. And in the baby industry, we're not alone. We no longer sell strollers. And it's very painful because we used to demo them all day long. But we walked into a USA baby site that was doing over $500,000 in gear, and we couldn't hit 50,000. But I'm demoing all day long for them to walk to Amazon to buy it. I made the decision that gear is no longer in my life. And I think that if we can't come and work in margins that work to keep us in business, we will find something that works for us. We have to, or we won't be there. I mean, it's the bottom line. The landlords in Arizona tell us they cannot go and lower the rents. The cost of construction, the cost of this, the cost of that. I can't be the retailer out of a garage. I don't want to ship in cardboard boxes. Kids don't get excited, and parents don't learn about great toys that way. So I think somehow we're going to have to find a way to work in the margins and to make it work. And can we shave maybe 1 or 2 points? I think the manufacturers have. I think they've endured the cost of toy safety and everything. We may have to. But again, Mike, like you said, level the playing field and give us a shot to help keep us in business. And we've been paid a very high compliment from friends of mine today. They say that the atmosphere is great in toys. They think that we are all so friendly. I heard that from the clerk yesterday checking in. I think that we have to work together and get through this. Is there a comfortable margin? I don't think there will be for a year or two. I think there's some work ahead, and I think we need to work together to get there, but to keep pushing it and find the vendors who will push it.
I think that's, we're going to draw this to a close before there's further erosion, and we'll be the only people left here. But we want to say thank you very much for coming, and again, thank you to Astra.